Thank you very much to Clarita Maya, who is moderator of our panel. As mentioned, my name is Angelina Makwetla from South Africa. And I am not alone. I have a powerful delegation from South Africa. I have with me Attila Dag and Turkmen Terzi from the Universal Rights Association and also from the Journalists and Writers Foundation, who have come with us from South Africa, and Turkey's loss is our gain. So we are learning from them. So thank you very much to both of you for inviting me, for giving me an opportunity to be part of this vibrant, very lively humanitarian discussion, dialogue about the plight of migrants and refugees. We also have in our delegation Professor Domingo, who is Dean of the Faculty of Law at Wits University. We have Sakina Kamwendo, who is one of our top journalists. And we have Sophie Mokoena, who is another top journalist from South Africa. So we have a powerful delegation. And why I am mentioning this delegation is that when we go back, we will stay as a team in order to work to address some of these challenges and to implement. There is nothing that beats implementation. Implement some of the ideas that we've heard from this conference and to keep the network going. So thank you very much. I would also like to congratulate the organizers on an excellent choice of topics that pushes us to look at refugees and migrant issues from a human rights angle. Now, I am one of 8 commissioners at the, sorry, I'm dropping things all over. I'm one of 8 commissioners, my slides, please. One of the 8 commissioners at the South African Human Rights Commission, and one of my focus areas is to promote and protect the rights of migrants and refugees in the country. And I'm particularly honored to be here today because of my passion and my work in nation building and in social cohesion. Our work at the Commission aligns perfectly with the goal of this conference towards the achievement of sustainable development goals. And as a result, while drafting this year's strategy and operational plan of the Commission, we put particular focus on how the South African Human Rights Commission will ensure the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. Which brings me now to the laws promoting migrants and refugees in South Africa. There's a convention relating to the status of refugees from 1951 and the protocol relating to the status of refugees 1966. Those are old laws that our country still upholds to this day. The declaration of the UN World Conference Against Racism, Racial Discrimination, Xenophobia, and Related Intolerance, which was taken in 2001. Then we have the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, 1981. And then our Constitution, which is the pillar of our democracy. And in the preamble to the Constitution, we state that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. And we are very proud of that diversity. Then we have the Immigration Act of 2002 and the Refugees Amendment Act of 2017. And that act establishes that non-nationals may reside legally in South Africa as asylum seekers or as recognized refugees. Now, according to the International Organization for Migration's World Migration Report of 2018, there are 244 million international migrants globally, which corresponds to 3.3 of the current world's population. So it can safely be inferred that the phenomena of migration, refugees, and citizens fleeing their country of origin to settle in another country is an internationally recognized phenomenon. I've been sitting here all morning listening to all the speakers, and this is a humanitarian challenge that all of us as human beings have to deal with. And I was particularly encouraged to learn that the people in this room think along the same lines. And it is so gratifying to talk to people who just get it. So you don't have to go to too many lengths to convince the people in this room. We know what we are talking about. We agree that the challenges exist. What we now need are solutions and to share those solutions. Since the end of apartheid, South Africa has been regarded as a popular migration destination, mainly by citizens of neighboring countries such as Zimbabwe. The country opened its doors to refugees and migrants, and in order to ensure the rights of this vulnerable group, our government has put in place several laws and policies. So the following, very quickly, are instruments that South Africa observes in order to promote and protect the rights of migrants and refugees. The first one is the Convention relating to the status of refugees, which I've already mentioned, the Declaration of the UN World Conference, the African Charter, and of course our Constitution. Right. Now let's talk about the challenges that migrants and refugees encounter. The pressure that migrants encounter from the host communities include public intimidation and verbal threats. We already heard from one of the earlier speakers about the three causes of that public intimidation, which is ignorance, which is poverty, and which is disunity. You hear a lot of uninformed people claiming that migrants and refugees have come to our country to take away jobs. And this ignorance results in threats, in extortion, in intimidation, or direct physical violence against families and properties of migrants and refugees, and displacement to areas of mass shelter. Just very quickly, that displacement to areas of mass shelter happens particularly in poor areas, where there's been acts of xenophobia and government has had to move in quickly to remove those refugees into places of mass shelter, places which are supposed to be on a temporary basis, but sometimes it takes long to sort out that problem. Migrants and refugees face huge difficulties in opening bank accounts, in getting admission of children to schools. And we know that all children in South Africa are entitled to an education, irrespective of their countries of origin. But you still find an ignorant headmaster who will say to the child, unless you bring the proper documentation tomorrow, don't come to school. Now, I have a legal person in my office, and the minute you say to Matthew, there is such and such a problem, Matthew will say, Commissioner, leave it to me. He goes to the school, he will call me from the school and say, it's all sorted. The child will be back in school tomorrow. That is what we need, that empathy, that love to help our fellow human beings. That is all that is needed. Then the Refugee Amendment Act also creates onerous requirements for qualifying for work visa endorsements for asylum seekers, thus effectively denying them the right to work. Migrant refugee children face a number of problems, including the lack of a safe and protective environment, particularly during outbreaks of xenophobic violence. Now that breaks my heart on an endless, everyday basis, because children should not suffer because of what we as adults do. Attila and Turkmen took us to dinner last night with a family from Turkey. And I said to them afterwards, how do people talk about such heartbreaking, sad stories of families being divided, where the parents have to flee and sometimes leave children behind, and you are able to relate the story. And it is just heartbreaking stories that we listen to on a day-to-day basis. Migrants and refugees who own and operate small businesses receive vicious threats and illegal eviction notices, as well as selective and discriminatory enforcement of laws at the hands of the police and local authorities. From what? From ignorance. Sometimes it's not just ignorance. Sometimes it's just people being reluctant to do what they are supposed to do, which is the legal thing. And then the amendment to the Refugees Act stipulates that refugees should now apply for permanent residence only after 10 years of residency, instead of the previous 5 years, which does not encourage integration of refugees into South African communities. And I can give my assurance to this conference that we have a chairperson who is very, very passionate about these issues, and we meet with the Minister for Home Affairs on a regular basis, because as human rights commissioners, we have got to make sure that these violations of human rights do not continue. We have to deal with them. A hostile asylum process which is fraught with maladministration and corruption makes it extremely difficult for asylum seekers to apply for and receive the permits for which they are entitled to. And what we do is we do unannounced visits to these places to go and find out what is going on and catch people doing the wrong thing. Because as the Human Rights Commission, we are entitled to do that, to monitor human rights. And very quickly, how we operate is that our commission derives its mandate from Section 184 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, and it states that we are required to promote respect for human rights and a culture of human rights, promote the protection, development, attainment of human rights, and to monitor and assess the observance of human rights in the Republic of South Africa. We have a mandate to call on government departments to come and inform us about what they are doing towards the promotion and protection of human rights. We are also mandated to investigate and report on observance of human rights, to take steps to secure appropriate redress where human rights have been violated. We carry out research and we educate. And that education is not easy. Now, what do we do in order to ensure social inclusion? The investigation into issues of the rule of law, justice, and impunity, which arose out of the 2008 public violence against non-nationals, has been followed up with another national investigative hearing on migration, xenophobia, and social cohesion. This group of commissioners, the 8 commissioners, started work last year in January. So when we looked at that 2008 investigation, we realized that some of the recommendations had not been implemented. Then we called a roundtable and said, let us talk I think it's Mr. Appleby who mentioned the Scalabrini institution, which we also work with. Then we have the Lindela Detention Monitoring Project. Lindela is one of the biggest repatriation centers in South Africa, and it is our job to monitor it on an ongoing basis to ensure that human rights are not being violated. Then, on a regular basis, as I said, we review government policies and legislation to make sure that they align with the rights of migrants and refugees. We are also a member of the United Nations Promotion Working Group, which is headed by the UN Head Commissioner for the Human High Commission for Refugees. Pardon that typo there. Right, what else does our government do in order to ensure social inclusion? We have ongoing community dialogues and conversations which provide a platform for people from diverse communities to talk about how to breach socio-historical divisions. Dialogue is very, very important. We have to keep talking. People make mistakes, and those mistakes can only be fixed by people. And it is only through ongoing dialogue where we call people who are migrants into our country, who are refugees, and we say to them, come, we want to listen to your challenges and jointly come up with solutions. Then we have the Social Cohesion Advocates, which is a group of eminent South Africans who were appointed by the Department of Arts and Culture to carry out programs on nation building and social cohesion. We've talked ad infinitum in South Africa about Ubuntu. But sometimes you ask yourself, do we ourselves know we are talking about? Because all that Ubuntu means is, I am because you are. And because you are, I am. That is Ubuntu. And if we practice that on a daily basis, there is no problem that will beat us in solving our human rights problems. And then we have the Africa Month program, which is celebrated annually to promote cultural exchange between South Africans and people from the continent. The school curriculum, the Department of Basic Education, has ensured that the school curriculum encourages and promotes a sense of belonging for all learners. And we know that children are the best advocates. Children will remind parents, no, mommy, no, daddy, you cannot talk that way. This is what my teacher said. Then we have the World Refugee Day celebrations, which are held on the 20th of June each year by the government in partnership with the UN High Commission for Refugees. Then we have a very interesting program, the South African Migrant Awards, the Mkhaya Awards. Mkhaya is a Zulu word for homeboy or homegirl. So we are saying to people who've come to join our population, our communities, to say, welcome, we appreciate what you do. And some of the 2017 winners came from Mozambique, from Zimbabwe. And then we had a Most Integrated Community Award, which was won by a community crisis committee, because we want to highlight those best practices. We want to say, this is what you can do to integrate and welcome people who are not the same as you are into the community and understand where they are coming from. And it is Dr. Suchat who said, the lamps are different, but the light is the same. So if we put our lamps together, we can make a bigger light. And then very quickly, the African Center for Cities and Partners did a large-scale research project to examine the role of migrant and refugee entrepreneurs in the informal economy. So some 2,000 interviews were done in Cape Town and Johannesburg, but we've also got a lot of cross-border traders into South Africa. People who come and buy goods in South Africa to go and sell them in their countries. So we have to welcome those entrepreneurs. And we found through that project that migrants and refugees are making a significant contribution by servicing the needs of poorer consumers, by introducing new products and business opportunities and activities. Another contribution is that obviously people have to find a place to live, so they pay rent, largely to South African property owners. And then migrant and refugee entrepreneurs generate employment in Johannesburg, where interviews were conducted and migrants and refugees were found to be twice as likely to employ local people. I'm going to skip through that one, and then a few success stories of entrepreneurs back. Lucy, who is a hair specialist from Nigeria, she's not only manufacturing her own products, but also empowers local youth to become natural hair specialists. And she has a website where she invites young people who want to go into the hair industry to come work with her for a few months. She empowers them. She employs some of the ones that come out of that. And then we had also from Nigeria. Those of you who know South Africa know that Orlando Pirates is one of our biggest and most popular teams, and he was our goalkeeper. And then we have Tshepo Tsola, who is a legendary jazz musician from Lesotho. And then Connie Ferguson from Botswana is a well-renowned actress and movie producer in the country. And that last one, I met her the other day, and she said, no, I'm not a migrant. I got married into South Africa. So she's a very proud South African, and that is Dimpo Hani, who is the wife of the ANC struggle hero. So I hope I've painted a picture of how South Africa attempts to welcome and assimilate migrants and refugees. This is a journey that we are undertaking. We are a new democracy. We are trying very hard. And as the South African Human Rights Commission, we are the protectors of this young democracy. And the one way that we do that is to ensure that the human rights of all people within South Africa are protected. Thank you.